How's it going, everyone? Good evening to everyone. Hope you're all doing well today. Today's subject is a little bit grim, but it's something that I had to talk about because it's been on my mind for the last few hours. My father passed away when I was about 15, and he had a carcinoma. He had a tumor on his lung, which spread to the rest of his body and killed him at 42 years young. And since that happened, of course, I've always felt deep down inside that it was his exposure to Agent Orange in Vietnam which caused this illness, or at least contributed in part. Yet, I had no evidence or proof. I was young when he passed, well, I was 14, but as far as the being able to prove the link, or causation versus correlation on these things, it seemed a little bit out of my hands, and my thought is, well, what can a person do anyway? And as today I was doing a little bit more research, about every couple years I go and I dig through and look for the latest releases on Agent Orange or Vietnam, but mainly looking for information about where my father was stationed, which was in Cam Ranh Bay. And he didn't much talk about the war with my mom, so that she didn't have a lot of information to share. But the recent information releases that have come out, they basically admitted that pretty much every soldier who was stationed in Vietnam from the year 1962 to 1975, which is basically the whole war, was likely exposed to it, at least in part. Now, a lot of these, of course, being in the military likes to dispute that there's any danger. And they knew damn well what they were doing. Agent Orange's dioxin that was sprayed on the jungles in order to kill the foliage, obviously, but it killed everything else as well. Now, the soldiers coming back, many of them within the next decade started suffering from a variety of different types of tumors and cancers, and the list goes on. There was at least a dozen different, illnesses which are attributed to that, and people can seek financial compensation for it as well. The interesting thing is that they didn't create the Agent Orange law declaration or the type of lawsuit fund, whatever it was. They finally put out the whatever, I can't remember the name of it, but it was in 1991 that they finally said, okay, you can sue the military over deaths caused by this. My father passed away in 1991, so the year that he passed away is the year that they declared that yes, you can sue us basically for any illnesses that may have arisen from this. My thought was always this: my father made a choice. He went to war, he joined the military. And he was exposed to a chemical. If that was the end of the story and it killed him, then so be it. I mean, there's not much I can do to change that. However, reading further research, it turns out that many of these, it turns out that this is extended. Now the research is showing that this exposure type dioxin can remain in a person for years afterwards. And anyone who had children after coming back from the war could have likely passed on certain illnesses, certain traits, certain diseases to their kids, including spinal bifida. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but there's a few cases that have been proven and successfully sued because of the children. But now it's even worse because they're finding out that it may even skip a generation, some of these illnesses, and that the soldiers in Vietnam, especially women who were exposed to dioxin, it may affect their grandchildren. And many of the kids who are being born now, or have been over the past 15 years or so, might get illnesses within childhood or later in life because of their grandparents' exposure to Agent Orange. That's my kids. That's my children that are in the house right now that are 6 and 9 years old, that I have passed down whatever may have been passed on to me from my own father, if that's the case. Now, I can never confirm how much he was exposed. I don't know how many missions he went on. I don't know whether he worked with it directly, because I know a lot of the people who worked in the, I think it was the C-43 cargo transport planes, where they were transporting the stuff, a lot of those people were exposed a lot more. Well, I found out that those very airplanes weren't even decommissioned until 1986, meaning for 10 years after the war, soldiers were continuing to fly missions in these contaminated vessels, if you will, and many of them may have suffered too. Now, the military is no stranger to lying to its soldiers. I mean, after World War II, there was several cleanup groups that went to clean up an island that was basically where the U.S. tested its nukes. And they went there to do this cleanup, completely unaware of the dangers. Government was well aware of the dangers, and many of these people came down with cancers later. And they tried to unsuccessfully sue the government, and the government was in complete denial. And this has been the case, from the beginning of time. I mean, governments don't want to admit that they sent people off to a pointless war, and that not only was the war bad enough in essence by itself, but then our own government decides to spray something that kills off its own soldiers, knowing damn well the dangers. You can't say that, they didn't know the dangers of Agent Orange back then. It's preposterous. They knew damn well what they were doing, and that was considered a risk, a worthwhile risk for them. So I may end up pursuing avenues to regain compensation for what I went through in my youth. I've always just kind of written it off as, it is what it is. The military sucks, and they're going to do what they're going to do. But when I found out that people have successfully sued for lawsuits that cover money that should have been paid out at the time, from the time I was 14 until 18, and my brother was 11 at the time. The whole time growing up, my mom had to, do her best to work at Fred Meyer to try to support us. And I believe that having a father at that time would have been a wonderful thing. But I can't change the history of it. But I'll be damned sure that if I can find a way to sue the military in any way, shape, or form to regain compensation for all the shit I went through, I'm torn in my mind. On one side, I don't believe in frivolous lawsuits. And then the other side of me is saying, this isn't frivolous, dude. It's your fucking dad. You have every right to be pissed off about it. So I'm not sure how to feel or what to think. Not about the money, of course. It's about the principle of the issue. It's about one more lawsuit getting the government to admit that they killed their own people. So I'm not sure what else to say about it, My father's father was in World War II, and I'm sure he suffered from shell shock and a variety of the other issues, PTSD, just like my father did. And, sometimes I wear this around my neck, which is one of my grandfather's rings, but as well as this is a U.S. Army Vietnam Cam Ranh Bay NCO open mess. It was a token for food for the soldiers. And my father's dog tag. And this other one that I interestingly got in 1991. It says, "A Prayer for Peace, Desert Storm, 1/15/91." And it was made by a friend's family member who fought in Desert Storm. And thinking back to all these, depleted uranium rounds being used over there in the Middle East by the military, well knowing what they are. These things never end. It's not a lesson that's learned by the government or the military. They just don't give a fucking shit. They don't care about you. They don't care about the people. They don't really care about winning a war. What they care about is keeping the war machine going because it profits. And meanwhile, a lot of good people die. A lot of good soldiers die. And I think one of the most shameful parts about it is that Americans like to talk so big about how we take care of our own and our soldiers are important and we need to bring our vets home. But the minute they're here, they're just spit on and treated like shit. The VA hospital is a complete joke and has been. I mean, you don't hear about soldiers being treated the way they deserve to be treated. You hear them being denied claims and benefits. And, for people who fought supposedly to keep this country free, which of course I don't buy into all that either. I know that many of these wars are unnecessary, but the fact is we called upon our own people to go fight, and they did. And they were harmed by our own weapons. This is thousands, or if not millions, of soldiers over time dying from friendly fire through things that could have been avoided. So, war is disgusting. It's a gross business, and anyone who romanticizes it doesn't understand it and hasn't been in it or known anyone who has, because people don't come back from the war ranting and cheering about killing people unless they're pretty fucked up in the head. And there are those people out there. But many of these kids that go off to fight thinking, I want to go kill me some ragheads and I want to go off and fight for my country, and they come back saying, wow, they were people just like us. I was fighting myself, because humans are connected in that way, that we see ourselves in others. If you've never heard of it, I'd look up the Christmas truce of 1918, I think it was. It's during World War I. Two sides both just held up white flags. They stopped the war. They ate a Christmas dinner, enjoyed some time. They couldn't even understand each other's languages. But just for that day, they just stopped the war. And then they went back to their respective trenches and blew the shit out of each other. And so, no, I don't romanticize war or the military. I see right through it. I see exactly what it is. It's played as a game. People are used as pawns. And in reality, this idea that we need to protect the border, to me, is just so obvious that I don't think anybody's really arguing that. We're so far beyond the border protection. If we really believed that, we wouldn't be spending $1 trillion, or at least $500 billion a year on the military, when we could defend the border for a fraction of that. It's because of our military bases in 100 other countries around the world, and the fact that we are a dominating force in the world, and the people are the pawns. So I'm going to go on and on about it if I keep going. This was supposed to be about Agent Orange, but how the military fucks its soldiers is just one of the many ways. So be well, my friends, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.